Welcome to this new video. This time I want to go over man-in-the-middle attacks. And in this video, I'm going to go over the concept and show some tools. I am not going to demonstrate how a man-in-the-middle attack works with tools in this video. I'm going to say that for another video. In this case, we're going to be talking about the concept, how it works, how it operates, and what you can do to protect or identify a man-in-the-middle attack. In a future video, I'll be creating examples of how attackers, or you could do it for testing purposes. Now, as you can see right here, we have a simple network with two users. And let's say that these users are sending messages to each other. It could be via Bluetooth, or maybe they're using the Wi-Fi network right here, right? And they're both communicating to the Wi-Fi network, and they're communicating to each other. Or it could be that these users are going to the cloud to access cloud resources. It could be their social media accounts, or it could be their bank or their business, whatever they want. The point is that a man-in-the-middle attack is when an unauthorized user intercepts the connections between two parties. In this case, let me erase this one more time and do it again. In this case, let's say that we have this user who is accessing the bank, right? So right from here, we have a Wi-Fi connection, and the user is accessing the bank in the cloud. Through the use of different techniques that it could include social engineering and obviously different technical tools, this attacker, this person, right, it's an evil person right here, is gonna get into the communication or the session that this user had established to the bank, and it's gonna be able to decrypt and modify that information if he or she chooses to, right? So as you could see, the attacker is able to do this and modify it, and this user who is initiating or receiving the communication does not know what's happening. Neither does know what's happening the other party that the user is communicating to. Let's say that this user in here is accessing a bank, right? When the user provides the username and password and credentials to access the bank, the attacker is going to be able to get that information and store that information. The attacker could potentially change that information if the attacker wants to, but what's the point of changing the information that is correct, right? The thing is that the attacker is going to be right here in the middle, not physically in the middle. It's just a concept, but it's going to be between the communications of these two parties, and they don't know what is happening. Now, man-in-the-middle attacks come in different shapes and forms. There's no such thing as just one type of man-in-the-middle attack. There are different type of man-in-the-middle attacks that affect different type of technologies and solutions, and the tools the attackers use to carry out the man-in-the-middle attacks are going to vary depending on the type of attack that is being conducted. Now, as you can see here, there's a nice chart. I got this from Fortinet. I'm not going to take credit for this. I downloaded it from Fortinet, where they list the different type of, man-in-the-middle attacks. And as you could see, one of the most popular attacks that is happening right now is email hijacking. And you may be asking, what is email hijacking? An email hijacking attack is when the attacker takes control of an email that does not belong to the attacker. It belongs to somebody else. And there are many different ways that that can be carried out. If somebody doesn't have a strong authentication on the email, then somebody can potentially get that information, right? And use that email to hijack that email for malicious purposes. And we all get this right here. And this is one of the most popular attacks. If you use any type of network monitoring tool on your cloud interfaces, on your cloud technology, you'll see how, there are many different type of attacks that are happening that can potentially lead to email hijacking, things like password praise, password guessing, brute force, so on and so forth. So when it comes to these type of attacks, you have to make sure that your email provider, that your email settings are secure, and then you have all the security controls in place to prevent this type of attacks. Also, the attacker may be able to spoof the email address or DNS servers. I mean, there are many different ways that could be done to come up with this, but this is one of the most popular ones because everybody has an email, right? And if somebody gets access to the email, boom, great things happens. Another popular one that is like, it's been around since forever, is Wi-Fi eavesdropping. With Wi-Fi eavesdropping is that the attacker sets up a rogue access point in the network, and it's going to pretend to have the same SSID as the one that is being used in the production network, and maybe catch people who connect to it not knowing that they are connecting to the wrong network, right? Let me bring this over here. Let me use this network diagram that I have right here in the back. So let's go over this real quick. This is an access point that we have here. Let me get my my pen back, right? So this is an access point that is connected to, in this case, the firewall. I'm gonna go directly. I'm gonna oversimplify this network. And then from here, it's going to go to the internet, network resources, blah, blah, blah. So we have this computer that is connecting to these access points wirelessly, right? But an attacker with physical access to the network, this is why physical security is also part of network security or cybersecurity, right? Sometimes people think about physical security as facilities and not IT, and it's true, there's like a gray line in there, but there's gotta be a communication or between facilities and tech in the organization. So an attacker who can potentially set up another access point, right, to the same network, and again, I'm oversimplifying this. And then there is another user that wants to connect to this network right here. Let's say that the name of this SSID is BU1, right? The attacker is going to set up this access point with the same SSID name BU1, but the attacker is going to be managing this connection, right? So when this laptop wants to connect to BU1, technically speaking, depending on how the network and the attack is being conducted, if this access point is closest to this computer and is broadcasting a stronger signal, this computer is going to automatically connect to this access point, to this SSID. Now, obviously, right in here, you're going to have the attacker controlling this communication and sniffing whatever is going through here, right? So that is another type of Wi-Fi eavesdropping, or another type of man-in-the-middle attack. Now let's come back to the other window that we had. The other type of attack we see here is DNS spoofing, and DNS spoofing is very common. Oh my gosh. So what DNS spoofing is, when the attacker, let me bring this back here. When you want to access a website, let's say that you want to access something on the web, your bank or your school, and let's say like bank.com is the domain name, right? And you're going to access that over the cloud, and here you are, you connect to your wireless, connects right here, and then you come right here. So DNS spoofing is when the attacker is able to spoof the DNS name, in this case bank.com in this example, and this DNS name, remember how DNS works, the DNS name is the representation of an IP address or IP addresses that belong to that organization. Let's say that the IP address is 10.1.1.2, right? And then when the resolver is going to happen, when you come here, you're going to go, oh, I want to go to bank.com. DNS is going to happen, and DNS says, you know what? Bank.com is in 10.1.1.2, and it's going to send you there. But if the attacker is able to perform DNS spoofing at any level, right? Let's say that the attacker is able to perform DNS spoofing here in your organization, or here on your file on the on your computer, right? You have DNS server here that are going to be forwarding the request, and again, this is all conceptual. It's not as easy as it sounds, but this is just to explain the point. If the attacker is able to create a record on this DNS saying like bank.com is not 10.1.1.2, it's going to be 50.8.8.5 or 4, then when you want to go to bank.com and you reach out over to the DNS server, the DNS server is going to find the new spoofed entry, and it's going to send you to another server that the attacker is manipulating. Again, this is an oversimplified way of how DNS spoofing works, but that is the concept. DNS spoofing can work on many levels. It can work right here on the host, right? Maybe the attacker modified the host files on your computer. So when you do DNS resolution, you don't have to go out. It's going to be redirected right there. So there are many different ways that could happen. So the other one that we have, let's bring this down here so we move along, is DNS. We have, let's talk about IP spoofing, right? Which is similar to DNS spoofing in terms of that instead of modifying the DNS name, the attacker is spoofing the IP address, right? So again, it's not as simple as it sounds, and instead of being redirected to one name represented by an IP address, it's going to go to a different IP address that the attacker was able to modify in the DNS entry. The other attack that we have here is session hijacking. And session hijacking, it used to be more common, I remember, in the Windows 10, not Windows 10, Windows 7 era. You know, I used to see a lot of session hijackings. For a session hijack to be successful, there are many things that need to have in place. This could be a type of application attack, or the attacker is intercepting itself in the communication and then taking over the session in which the attacker, let me bring this right here. The attacker is, every time that, let me just go over here for 1 second and just talk about this. Every time that you connect to an application, and again, we're connected to the Wi-Fi connects to the firewall is like, this is all logical, by the way, right? So here we are. So when this user wants to log in to her bank to check the bank account, to transfer money, blah, 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 it's going to establish the session and it's going to provide the name, the username and password. What the attacker is going to do is going to steal or take over this logical session that was established between the user, obviously not the user, the user's device, and in this case, the bank's website. So this is a type of sophisticated attack where the attacker waits for the victim to log into the application, right? And then once the victim successfully logs into that application, that's going to create a session cookie that the attacker is going to take over that session cookie to continue access as if it were the user. So if you think about it, the user did all the heavy lifting. The attacker is just reaping the benefits of that. So it is a highly sophisticated type of attack. It happens all the time. and it's usually targeting websites or targeting browsers, I should say, like the application of the browsers. So the other type of attacks that we have here, let me bring this over one more time. So we went through secure socket layer SSL hijacking. And you might be thinking, SSL is secure, nobody's gonna take over my SSL communication. You know what? SSL could be hijacked as well. It's kind of crazy, but it happens. And in this type of attack, SSL hijacking, let me bring this over here. Again, we have let's come up with a bank. In this case, I'm going to make it like closer right here. This user is going to communicate. This is going to communicate here. It's going to communicate here. And then we have bank.com or any other domain, of course, that is going to offer a secure connection. And the connection can be secured with SSL secure socket layer, which used to be the standard, the de facto back in the days. And I believe SSL has version 1, 2, and 3, but SSL was deprecated in 2015, meaning that TLS took over SSL, even though we still refer to TLS as SSL for secure connections. The protocol is TLS, not SSL. So when you go to a website and the website is protected with a certificate, right? Maybe you have seen that message saying that the certificate is not invalid. Are you sure you want to connect? Blah, blah, blah. So that information is going to be checked. But if you're using SSL, the attacker can use tools to strip the communication that is being encrypted with SSL. There are many different type of tools that could be put into place to do this. And not only that, there are different ways that an attacker can inject right in the middle. And again, it's not as simple as it sounds. This is not a movie. This is not, I forgot the name of this serious TV show that it was like this super hacker hacking into all different things. It's not as simple as that, right? But still, you still have to be protected because tools out there to do this. So what you need to know for SSL hijacking, number one, try not to use SSL. If you are hosting a site or whatever, use TLS. And number two, don't connect to websites that you see messages that the certificate is not valid and things of that nature. Now let's move on because I'm tired of talking. This is a long concept. ARP, cache poisoning, and we have stealing browser cookies. Now, stealing browser cookies, are very similar to session hijackings, but they're not the same. On ARP, cache poisoning is when, let me come right here, when we have, let's say, these two computers, and again, I am oversimplifying the network diagram. These two computers, let's say, are connected to in this case, they should have been connected to the switch and not the firewall. But anyway, this is just an example. So when these users are going to communicate in the same network, they are going to go through different type of naming resolution process if they're using host names like PC1 and PC2, for instance. And then when you want to communicate to PC2, the system is going to search DNS, and DNS is going to ask, who has this IP address? DNS is going to respond, it's going to provide the IP address. And then that IP address needs to be resolved to a MAC address, right? And that process is called, I forgot the name of that process. So the IP addresses are going to be resolved to the MAC address because the switch, and let's pretend that this is a switch, not a firewall, is going to have an ARP table with all the MAC addresses, right? And how they relate to IP addresses. So when a user, let's say user 2, wants to communicate with user 1, there is an ARP table that says user 1, that is IP address, let's say 10.1.1.1, is MAC address ABC, for instance. And then PC2 is 10.2.2.2 and is MAC address DEF, right? So the attacker is going to be able to poison the MAC address table either on the switch, or the attacker is going to poison the MAC address table on the host. So when the host tries to communicate with the PC2, tries to communicate to PC1, there is a new entry that says that 10.2.2.2 is whatever the attacker wants to use, FWJ, whatever. So you get the concept. So there is another type of attack. This usually happens within the same network, right? And by the same network, I'm not just talking about here in this internal network. It could happen if people connect to a public Wi-Fi, right? And this is why, like, if you're using public Wi-Fi, make sure you have all the security controls in place in your laptop or device, whatever you're using, because the attacker could be performing the attack right here and creating a lot of these man in the middle attacks is possible, when multiple devices connected to the same network. Now, that is for that. Now, to wrap it up, let's talk about what tools attackers can use to do this. Now, there are many tools that can be used to perform a man-in-the-middle attack. And again, remember that it all depends on the type of attack that is going to be conducted and the type of environment where that attack is going to be conducted in, and the final goal. An attacker could use something as simple as Wireshark. It could use EtherCap. It could use BetterCap. It could use Kane-enable. It could use SSL strip, the Mallory. It could use Fiddler. It could use all different type of tools out there. And as you could see, if I come here and I do, let me get this. So what do I have? I installed GNS-NIF, I installed EtherCap, I installed BetterCap on this computer. You could use any type of proxying tools. The point is that you don't have to worry about so much what tools is taking place. What you need to do as a user is make sure you have the proper security controls in place on your computer. You have antivirus, you have everything up to date, you have the firewall, and use common sense, right? If you're going to connect to a public Wi-Fi, why don't you use a VPN instead of like connecting just like that? You don't know where you're connecting to. Or better yet, if you don't have the option, if you can do the hotspot on your phone and not use a public Wi-Fi, that would be even better. So I know this was a lot of conceptual information about man-in-the-middle attacks. Again, this was for educational purposes, and in future videos we're gonna be showing different examples of how different tools can be used to perform this type of attacks. And again, that's gonna be for testing purposes and on equipment that we own, that I own. It is illegal to perform this type of attacks. It is a crime on a device you don't have authority on. With that being said, if you found this information useful and you made it this far, we're 23 minutes into this video, consider subscribing to my channel, clicking on the like button, or leave a nice comment. That would be greatly appreciated. Or if you think that somebody else can benefit from the content of this video or the other videos that I have in the channel, feel free to share that information as well. Thanks again for watching, and I'll talk to you on the next video.